It started quietly, like most great cosmic stories do. On an ordinary night in late October, the sky over Chile's Atacama Desert was perfectly clear, no wind, no clouds, just the cold breath of the universe stretching above. In the control room of the Vera Rubin Observatory, a young astronomer noticed something strange on her monitor. A faint, barely more than a flicker, had shifted position between two frames of sky survey data. At first, she thought it was a calibration glitch, one of those random pixels that sometimes lights up for no reason. But then it moved again. Not in a straight line like a typical asteroid or comet, but with a subtle curve, a kind of graceful arc that didn't belong to anything catalogued. When the team cross-checked the data, the numbers told a story that was impossible to ignore. Whatever this thing was, it was moving far too fast to be local. By the next morning, telescopes from Hawaii to South Africa were pointed toward Jupiter's orbit. The object was faint, smaller than a kilometer across, but its trajectory didn't match any known body in our solar system. It wasn't orbiting the sun, it was passing through, cutting across gravitational lines like a skipping stone on a pond. The math didn't lie. Its velocity suggested an interstellar origin, faster than any comet, faster than any rock we've ever tracked. For a brief moment, astronomers thought it could be a second Oumuamua, another visitor from deep space. But something about it felt different. This one wasn't tumbling or slowing down as it approached Jupiter. It was stable, steady, almost deliberate. Then came the first real shock. When scientists ran a deeper scan of the surrounding region, faint signatures appeared behind it, 5 smaller echoes, moving in perfect synchronization. They weren't debris or fragments, their brightness and distance ratios stayed constant. To anyone watching the data stream, it looked like a family of objects traveling together, each one following the exact same orbital corridor. That shouldn't happen. Random fragments don't stay neatly lined up across millions of kilometers. It was as if these objects were linked by an invisible thread, guided by something beyond simple gravity. Within hours, the discovery went viral across the global astronomy network. Observatories began sharing raw data in real time. Space agencies canceled routine projects to redirect resources toward tracking what was now being called the formation. NASA, the European Space Agency, and JAXA all moved their attention to the coordinates near Jupiter's orbit. Supercomputers worked around the clock to calculate potential trajectories, but every model broke down after a few hours of simulation. The objects refused to behave. They weren't slowing from solar drag or showing the gas tails of comets. Instead, they maintained constant velocity, cutting through Jupiter's orbit as if it were nothing but empty road. As the days passed, the world started paying attention. News outlets ran headlines about a cosmic convoy and mysterious visitors beyond the sun. Scientists tried to stay calm on camera, but you could hear the excitement and fear behind their carefully measured words. Every major telescope on Earth turned toward Jupiter's region, and still, the formation seemed to glide effortlessly, untouched by the planet's immense gravity. It didn't act like a rock, or ice, or even a cluster of asteroids. It acted like it knew where it was going. Finally, the International Astronomical Union gave it a name. The largest and brightest of the 6 objects was officially designated EOS 9. The name carried weight, the dawn of something new, something unknown. For most people watching from Earth, it was just another headline in a restless world, another story of space that might fade by next week. But for the scientists staring at their screens, EOS 9 was more than data. It was a messenger, a question mark hurled across the gulf between stars. And as it crossed Jupiter's orbit, carrying its silent companions behind, one thought echoed through every observatory on Earth: we are not alone in the traffic of the cosmos anymore. Within just a few days, the mystery deepened. What began as a faint blur near Jupiter had now turned into a cosmic procession that no one could explain. Around the world, telescopes kept their eyes fixed on EOS 9, but every new observation raised more questions. The 5 smaller objects trailing it were still there, holding their perfect positions as if tied together by invisible threads. At first, scientists thought they were fragments, maybe pieces of a larger comet that had broken apart long ago. But fragments drift. They scatter and spread out. These 5 did not. Their spacing stayed precise, their motion synchronized, their light intensity steady. It looked deliberate, like choreography written across millions of kilometers of space. The first real conflict came when computer models started to fail. Every attempt to predict their paths ended in nonsense. The objects weren't obeying normal gravitational laws, at least not in a way anyone understood. It was as if they were locked into a formation, reacting to each other's movements instead of the pull of the Sun or Jupiter. Some astronomers argued it was just coincidence, a temporary alignment caused by perspective. But that theory collapsed as soon as the formation shifted, turning in unison like a flock of birds changing direction mid-flight. Nothing natural in space behaves like that. In the following nights, as Eos 9 drew closer to Jupiter's orbit, the pattern grew even clearer. The 6 objects were weaving around one another in repeating loops, slow, graceful spirals that seemed to balance each other's gravity perfectly. One scientist described it as a gravitational dance, a kind of orbital harmony no human had ever witnessed before. If one object drifted slightly off course, the others corrected instantly, adjusting as though bound by an unseen rhythm. When the data was plotted in 3 dimensions, the pattern resembled a flower, its petals spinning gently around a shared center. Nature rarely creates something so precise without reason. At NASA headquarters, the tension was building. The discovery had gone beyond curiosity, it had become an international priority. Eos 9 was moving fast, and the chance to study it up close wouldn't last long. Within hours, a joint emergency collaboration was announced between NASA and the European Space Agency. All non-essential deep space missions were temporarily suspended, and communication satellites were reoriented to gather telemetry from the region around Jupiter. The Juno spacecraft, already orbiting the planet, was given new instructions to adjust its path for a better look, even if it meant risking its instruments. Probes from the ESA's monitoring network were also redirected, rerouting years of planning in a matter of days. Humanity was about to chase something that didn't seem to want to be understood. By now, the public was fully aware. Social media was flooded with images and speculation. Were these asteroids, comets, or something else entirely? Some saw patterns in the data that looked almost like geometry. Others claimed the formation was sending rhythmic radio pulses, though no confirmed signal had been detected. Journalists camped outside observatories, trying to squeeze answers from tired scientists who barely had time to sleep. The story of Eos 9 had captured the world's imagination, but inside mission control rooms, excitement was slowly giving way to unease. The deeper they looked, the stranger the readings became. Then, just as Juno's instruments began returning preliminary data from the outskirts of Jupiter's magnetosphere, everything changed. The signal strength dropped without warning. First a flicker, then static, then complete silence. Every data stream monitoring Eos 9 and its companions went dark at once. Ground-based telescopes couldn't pick up reflections, radar systems showed nothing but noise. It was as if something in that region had swallowed all electronic communication. Scientists checked for solar interference, equipment faults, even cyber attacks, but none of it fit. The blackout wasn't random. It was centered exactly where Eos 9 and its 5 companions were last seen. For the first time, humanity faced the possibility that this was not just observation, it was interaction. Something near Jupiter had silenced our instruments, cutting off our gaze just as we were about to see the truth. In observatories across the world, the monitors glowed with empty data fields, and a single question filled every control room: what could possibly hide itself from the eyes of an entire planet? At first, everyone thought it was a technical glitch. When the first observatory in Chile lost visual contact with Jupiter's region, engineers rushed to check cables, power systems, and software updates. But within minutes, the same silence began spreading across the planet. Japan's Subaru telescope lost focus. The Keck Observatory in Hawaii went dark. Then NASA's Deep Space Network, the backbone of space communication, reported strange interference patterns disrupting their signal channels. One by one, the world's eyes turned blind toward the same point in the sky. The area around Jupiter, once glowing with reflected sunlight, became a static-filled void. Eos 9 and its companions had vanished, not just from sight, but from every measurable wavelength. The conflict deepened quickly. Spacecraft orbiting Mars began experiencing communication lag. The Juno probe, already near Jupiter, stopped transmitting entirely. Even satellites in Earth's orbit picked up flickering distortions, like ripples across invisible water. Astronomers compared notes in real time, and what they found made no sense. The blackout wasn't random. It was expanding outward from a single source, the exact coordinates of the Eos 9 formation. Whatever had happened near Jupiter was spreading across millions of kilometers, touching sensors, antennas, and even deep space monitoring arrays. No known natural event could cause that. There was no solar flare, no magnetic storm, no cosmic ray burst. The universe had gone strangely quiet, and that silence carried weight. In control rooms around the world, the tension was unbearable. Data screens flickered with bursts of unreadable code. Some instruments were showing reverse polarity, others were measuring negative frequencies, numbers that shouldn't exist in real physics. Engineers rebooted systems, recalibrated hardware, even switched to backup frequencies. Nothing helped. It was like something out there was deliberately blocking or distorting every attempt to look. The blackout zone around Jupiter had become a curtain, and whatever was behind it didn't want to be seen. Then came the twist. On the second night of silence, several low-frequency radio arrays in Australia picked up a pulse. It wasn't strong, barely a whisper above background noise, but it was unmistakable. A single, repeating burst of energy every few minutes, perfectly timed, perfectly spaced. The pattern didn't match any known cosmic phenomenon. It wasn't from the Sun, it wasn't from Jupiter's magnetic field, and it definitely wasn't man-made. The pulse rippled outward like a heartbeat, washing across the solar system in slow waves. As it passed through Earth's upper atmosphere, even amateur radio operators could hear faint distortions, soft clicks and hums buried under static. For a brief moment, the entire planet was listening to something that didn't belong. Scientists immediately got to work. Using data fragments from before the blackout, researchers at the European Space Agency began reconstructing partial telemetry. It was like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces, but slowly, a pattern started to emerge. The electromagnetic readings showed oscillations that didn't behave like natural waves. Instead of fading with distance, the signal maintained strength, bending around gravitational fields in ways no known energy should. Some called it a form of directed resonance, others whispered it might be a type of control mechanism. Whatever it wasn't a random cosmic event. The pulse wasn't just passing through space, it was interacting with it. In Houston, a senior analyst stared at the reconstructed waveform and said quietly, "It's not reflecting energy. It's generating it." That statement changed everything. If true, Eos 9 wasn't just drifting, it was doing something. The data implied self-sustaining energy output, as if the object were manipulating electromagnetic fields intentionally. For the first time, the scientific community had to face the possibility that Eos 9 was more than a rock or a comet. It might be a machine, or something with purpose. Around the world, people began looking up at the night sky with a new kind of fear. The space beyond Jupiter had gone dark, and in that darkness, something was pulsing, a silent rhythm echoing across the void. News channels ran with the headline, "The solar system has gone quiet." But behind closed doors, scientists weren't afraid of the silence. They were afraid of what might come after it stopped. The silence didn't last. After 3 long days of static and uncertainty, space weather centers across the globe began detecting something new, a rhythmic pulse cutting through the noise. It wasn't a random flare or background radiation, it was clean, steady, and precise. Every 91 minutes, like the ticking of an enormous cosmic clock, a burst of energy rippled through the solar system. At first, it was subtle, just a faint rise in electromagnetic readings, but soon the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every station, from NASA's Deep Space Network to Japan's Kiso Observatory, confirmed the same timing, the same interval, the same source, the region near Jupiter where Eos 9 had vanished. The conflict grew as the data was analyzed. The pulse wasn't just repeating, it was synchronized. Its timing matched something astonishing, the rotation period of Jupiter's Great Red Spot, the massive storm that has raged for centuries. Every time the storm completed one rotation, the pulse returned. The odds of such alignment by chance were almost impossible. Scientists argued endlessly. Some said it was coincidence, a natural interaction between Jupiter's magnetosphere and solar radiation. Others weren't so sure. The precision was too perfect. The wave's energy signature contained substructures, tiny fluctuations that looked like coded variations, too deliberate to be random. The more they studied it, the stranger it became. The pulse seemed to rise and fall with Jupiter's own magnetic rhythm, like a musical duet between the planet and the unknown visitor. The theory that no one wanted to voice began circulating in private chat rooms and encrypted research threads. What if Eos 9 wasn't just emitting energy? What if it was communicating? Some postulated it might be responding to Jupiter's electromagnetic field, while others dared to suggest the unthinkable, that the signal was a kind of conversation, a dialogue between the visitor and the gas giant. That idea sounded impossible, even ridiculous. How could a planet and an object talk to each other? But the data refused to stay quiet. The energy waves showed modulation patterns, regular rises and dips that matched the frequency shifts seen in radio transmissions. It was as if something intelligent was using Jupiter's natural energy field to amplify a message. When the raw data was converted to audio, the result was haunting. A deep, rolling hum that swelled and faded, like the breath of something immense drifting just beyond our understanding. It wasn't random static. It had rhythm. The world's radio observatories immediately repointed their arrays to focus on the source. Massive dishes in New Mexico, South Africa, and Chile locked onto the region, capturing terabytes of raw data. For the first time since the blackout, there was a signal strong enough to study in detail. The pulse wasn't just sound, it carried structure, like a waveform wrapped in mathematical order. Analysts spent sleepless nights decoding it, breaking it into harmonics, filtering out background noise. The deeper they went, the more complex it became. Embedded within the main frequency were secondary tones, faint echoes that formed repeating numerical sequences. Prime numbers. Fibonacci ratios. Natural constants woven into energy. Meanwhile, something strange began happening to Jupiter itself. The Great Red Spot, long known for its stability, started to change color. Its hue deepened to a darker crimson, its outer edges expanding slightly, almost as if reacting. The pulses grew stronger with each cycle, and the storm's activity seemed to mirror them, surging in power every 91 minutes. News outlets began broadcasting the discovery, calling it the heartbeat of Jupiter. People listened to the translated audio files online, and millions heard the low, resonant hum that now echoed through the void between worlds. Finally, after weeks of non-stop analysis, researchers isolated a clean segment of the signal and ran it through spectral filters. What emerged stunned everyone. The waveform wasn't random, it repeated at perfect intervals that formed a harmonic progression, a pattern found in music, in biology, in the resonant structures of living systems. It wasn't just energy. It was design. In laboratories and observatories, scientists sat in silence as the reconstructed pulse played over speakers. The sound was both mechanical and organic, something between a machine's vibration and a heartbeat. Some described it as mathematical art, others couldn't shake the feeling that they were hearing something alive. For the first time, humanity faced a signal that defied every line between nature and intent. Whatever EOS 9 was doing out there beyond Jupiter, it wasn't random. It was reaching out, and the universe was listening back. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shift in light. The 5 smaller companions trailing EOS 9 began to drift, breaking their perfect formation for the first time since discovery. For days they had moved like dancers in step, keeping steady distance as they followed the main object. But now, one by one, they started to peel away, spiraling downward toward Jupiter's upper atmosphere. From Earth, it looked like glowing embers falling into a storm. The change was subtle but undeniable. Their velocity increased, their paths curved inward, and their synchronization dissolved into chaos, or what seemed like chaos at first glance. Astronomers scrambled to calculate their descent trajectories, but nothing matched. The objects weren't obeying gravity the way they should. Instead of being pulled smoothly along Jupiter's rotation, they were moving against it, climbing and twisting in strange arcs, like swimmers fighting a powerful current and somehow winning. That was the moment when every major observatory realized something was terribly wrong, or incredibly deliberate. Jupiter's gravity is immense, strong enough to bend everything nearby into obedience. Yet these 5 objects moved as though the planet's pull was optional, bending physics into patterns that shouldn't exist. As they entered the outer layers of Jupiter's atmosphere, telescopes picked up something new. Each of the 5 released a faint vapor plume, streams of bright material venting into the gas giant's swirling clouds. The plumes expanded quickly, glowing blue-white in ultraviolet wavelengths. But the strangest part wasn't the color or brightness, it was the shape. Within hours, the vapor arranged itself into precise geometric lattices, enormous hexagonal grids spreading across Jupiter's upper atmosphere. They were visible even through moderate telescopes on Earth, like ghostly snowflakes floating above the storm. The world watched in disbelief as the planet's southern hemisphere filled with perfect, repeating patterns. No one could explain it. Meteorologists suggested chemical reactions between the vapor and Jupiter's ammonia clouds. Plasma physicists thought it might be electromagnetic interference. But when the patterns held their shape for several hours without dissolving, those explanations fell apart. Natural forces on Jupiter move at hurricane speeds, nothing stable should last more than a few minutes. And yet these hexagons remained, locked in place like symbols painted onto a living canvas. Even more disturbing, their arrangement mirrored the hexagonal storm already existing at Jupiter's North Pole, a storm that has baffled scientists for decades. 2 hexagons, one ancient and one brand new, separated by half a planet, pulsing faintly in rhythm with EOS 9's energy waves. NASA declared a planetary science emergency. Every available resource was redirected to monitor the event. The Juno spacecraft, already orbiting Jupiter, received new instructions to reposition itself for a close pass over the formation. It was a risky maneuver. The radiation near the planet's surface is lethal to electronics, but the opportunity was too great to ignore. If Juno could capture even a few clear images of the descending objects, it might reveal what no telescope could. As Juno dove through Jupiter's magnetic field, its instruments flared with interference. Cameras flickered, sensors overloaded, and radio signals began cutting out. The probe's autopilot adjusted to keep stability, but the data streaming back to Earth was chaotic, half noise, half shadow. Then, just before contact was lost, Juno's onboard camera transmitted one final burst of compressed images. Most of them were unreadable, smeared by radiation and motion blur. But one single frame stood out. It showed the edge of one vapor plume, partially illuminated by lightning. Inside the glowing cloud was something solid, angular, dark, and unmistakably structured. It wasn't a rock or debris. Its edges were too clean, its symmetry too deliberate. For a fraction of a second, humanity glimpsed a shape that had no business existing inside a gas giant's atmosphere. It was geometric, almost architectural, like a frame made of light and shadow hanging in the storm. When the image reached mission control, the room went silent. The data had already cut off. Juno was alive but blind. Analysts enhanced the frame over and over, sharpening pixels until the outlines became clear. It wasn't a trick of light. There, within Jupiter's clouds, something artificial, or something behaving as if it were, was taking form. Whatever Eos 9 and its companions were doing, it wasn't random. They hadn't fallen into Jupiter. They had arrived there on purpose. Within hours of Juno's last transmission, the world's scientific community erupted into chaos. What had once been a coordinated effort to understand Eos 9 now turned into a global competition. Every major observatory and research agency wanted to be the first to explain what was happening near Jupiter. Some teams rushed to publish papers claiming the hexagonal vapor grids were chemical illusions, complex but natural reactions in Jupiter's atmosphere. Others rejected that idea completely, arguing that the patterns were too exact, too organized to come from chaos. News outlets turned the debate into a media storm, showing split-screen interviews of scientists contradicting each other in real time. The race for answers had begun, and no one wanted to be left behind. As new data poured in, the conflict grew worse. Space agencies shared telemetry logs, but none of it lined up. The same event, when viewed through different instruments, seemed to tell different stories. European data showed thermal radiation consistent with ionized hydrogen, something that could happen naturally. But NASA's reading suggested structured frequency bands, as if energy was being transmitted, not emitted. Private observatories added more confusion by releasing optical data showing faint flickers of light along the edges of the vapor hexagons, tiny pulses that repeated in sequence, like Morse code written in lightning. The contradictions were everywhere, and the more information scientists gathered, the less sense it made. In the background of this frenzy, something even stranger began to happen. Late one night, a file appeared anonymously on a closed research forum used by astrophysicists. It contained snippets of raw radio data that supposedly came from deep within the blackout zone around Jupiter. The file was heavily encrypted and signed with no name, only a simple tag, "Listen closer." At first, many dismissed it as a hoax, but within hours, digital forensics confirmed the data was real. It matched archived readings from several space monitoring stations. The only problem was that this specific dataset wasn't supposed to exist. It contained segments that had never been officially recorded, as if someone, or something, had been collecting data outside the usual channels. When experts decrypted the hidden layers of the file, they found something even more startling. Embedded deep within the noise were repeating numerical sequences, patterns that followed no known signal structure. But when converted into frequency graphs, those sequences began to mirror something familiar, the spectral lines of hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. Hydrogen's signature is nature's fingerprint, the base of all cosmic chemistry. Yet here, the lines weren't in their usual arrangement. They were reorganized according to Fibonacci ratios, a mathematical sequence found everywhere in life, from galaxies to seashells. The discovery hit like a lightning bolt. If true, it meant that whoever, or whatever, had encoded the signal knew both the building blocks of matter and the universal pattern of life itself. Independent analysts around the world began working together online to verify the finding. Within days, they recreated the encryption method used in the leaked data. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became, these weren't random numbers. The pulse carried an intelligent structure, a kind of mathematical language hidden beneath the radiation. Some theorized it could be a universal greeting or a signature, a way of saying, "We understand your physics." Others argued it was just coincidence, an artifact created by the overlapping signals of Jupiter's chaotic magnetosphere. The world split in two almost overnight. One side believed Eos 9 had proven the existence of something beyond Earth, an alien intelligence reaching out through coded energy. The other side dismissed it as a grand illusion, a trick of pattern recognition amplified by human imagination. Governments remained silent, refusing to confirm or deny the authenticity of the leaked data. Social media became a battlefield of theories and fear. Memes joked about Jupiter's Wi-Fi, while documentaries claimed the signal was a cosmic warning. Inside observatories, tension reached breaking point. Some scientists quietly resigned, unable to face the ridicule or the pressure. Others doubled down, convinced they were on the edge of the greatest discovery in human history. For the first time, humanity wasn't just staring at the stars, it was arguing about what the stars were trying to say. And somewhere near Jupiter, 6 silent shapes continued to drift, indifferent to the noise below, as if watching us struggle to understand a language older than our species. When the excitement and chaos around the data finally began to calm, scientists turned their attention back to something fundamental: the path. If EOS 9 and its companions had entered our solar system, they must have come from somewhere. Every comet, every asteroid, every interstellar object leaves a trail that can be followed like breadcrumbs through space. Teams of astrophysicists around the world began tracing EOS 9's path backward, calculating its velocity, angle, and gravitational interactions to determine its origin. What they found, however, didn't fit any known pattern. The numbers refused to behave. Normally, when scientists retrace the orbit of an interstellar visitor, it eventually links to a known region. Perhaps the outskirts of another solar system or a cluster where gravitational forces could have pushed it outward. But EOS 9 was different. Its trajectory didn't connect to any known system. It wasn't coming from a nearby star or the galactic plane where most celestial traffic flows. Instead, it came from a place in the galaxy where there should be almost nothing, an empty stretch of darkness between the spiral arms of the Milky Way. This region, known as the interarm void, is a cold, silent expanse filled with thin dust and very little light. No known star systems exist there, no energy sources, no gravitational slings that could have accelerated something to such extreme speeds. The discovery created a new conflict among scientists. Some argued that perhaps EOS 9 had been drifting for millions of years, pulled slowly through interstellar space by random forces until it stumbled into our solar system by chance. Others disagreed, pointing out that its trajectory was too clean, too precise. Random objects don't travel in such a perfect, stable line across interstellar chaos without being influenced by something. It was as if the object had navigated through the void intentionally, skipping every major gravity well along the way. The deeper they studied, the more unnatural it seemed. Then came the twist that changed everything. As researchers refined the trajectory data, they discovered that EOS 9's origin line didn't just pass through an empty part of space, it intersected a known dark nebula catalogued decades earlier. The nebula was a dense cloud of dust and molecular gas so thick that it blocked starlight completely, appearing as a shadow across the Milky Way. Astronomers had always believed nothing could survive or even move efficiently through that region, it was simply too empty, too cold, and too lightless. But the vector pointed straight through it, as if EOS 9 had emerged from its heart. This revelation shook the scientific world. Some began to speculate that the dark nebula wasn't empty at all, that it could be hiding something massive or artificial within its core. Ancient stars, long dead, could have collapsed into strange remnants, or perhaps something else, something built, used that lightless region as a place to hide. Conspiracy theories spread online overnight. Some said it was a gateway, others said it was a nest. But in the halls of real science, the mood was more cautious. If EOS 9 had come from there, it might hold secrets about parts of the universe we had never truly explored. To better understand how such an object could have crossed that kind of distance, researchers turned to artificial intelligence. They fed years of interstellar data into predictive models, asking a simple question: could an object travel from that void to our solar system naturally? The simulations ran for days, processing billions of variables: gravity, radiation pressure, magnetic drift. When the results finally appeared, they shocked everyone. In almost every simulation, the object would have lost speed or been captured by nearby stars. The only way EOS 9 could have arrived with its current velocity was if it had been accelerated, deliberately. Something had given it a push, a gravitational slingshot strong enough to fling it across the galaxy like a stone from a sling. That realization changed the tone of the conversation completely. EOS 9 was no longer just a visitor, it was a messenger. The question was no longer how it got here, but why. Reporters, scientists, and even governments began asking what no one had dared to say out loud: if it was sent, then who sent it? Late-night news shows debated whether humanity was witnessing the first proof of intelligent design beyond Earth. Some wanted to believe it was a peaceful signal, a message from a civilization far older than ours. Others feared it might be something else entirely, something testing our defenses, or watching us from afar. As EOS 9 continued its silent journey around Jupiter, the question echoed across every lab, newsroom, and home on Earth. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't just searching for life out there, it was wondering if life had already found us. For weeks, Mission Control had been trying to reach Juno again. The spacecraft had gone silent after its risky dive toward Jupiter's atmosphere, where it was supposed to capture close-up data of the strange vapor plumes left behind by EOS 9's companions. Engineers had sent countless restart commands, hoping the signal would break through the dense radiation storm. Then, just as most had given up hope, a faint ping appeared in the Deep Space Network feed, a single compressed packet of data, sent automatically from Juno's backup system. It wasn't a full transmission, just a fragment of whatever the probe had managed to record before it went dark. But for the people watching that signal appear on their screens, it was like hearing a heartbeat from the edge of a storm. The small burst of data was instantly routed to NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California for analysis. When the team opened it, what they saw looked like static, thousands of lines of corrupted code, radiation noise, and unreadable fragments of compressed images. The Jupiter environment is brutal, and Juno had already exceeded its expected lifespan. Most believed the transmission was nothing more than scrambled memory bits, artifacts of a dying probe. But a few scientists refused to discard it. They began decoding it line by line, using noise reduction algorithms and AI reconstruction models. For 2 long days, the system worked through the interference, pulling faint shapes out of chaos. Slowly, something began to take form. The first visible pattern looked like frost, a thin layer of crystalline texture stretching across a dark background. But as the image sharpened, the frost began to reveal lines, angles, and repeating forms. It didn't look natural. It looked manufactured. In the middle of the noise, an outline emerged that no one could explain, a circular silhouette covered in intricate, grid-like pathways, like circuitry carved into ice. The symmetry was too perfect for geology, too intentional to be random noise. It was as if Juno had photographed something that shouldn't exist, a frozen structure, half machine, half mineral, hidden somewhere within Jupiter's turbulent clouds. At first, everyone thought it was a glitch, a trick of image compression caused by interference. But when the same pattern appeared across multiple image layers, perfectly aligned, the skepticism began to fade. Independent analysts from the European Space Agency and several universities confirmed that the repeating formations were real. They weren't just artifacts of software. The geometry matched across different data segments, forming a 3-dimensional lattice buried within the visual field. When the data was rendered into 3D space, it showed something astonishing, an object of enormous scale, symmetrical and layered, embedded deep within the clouds where no solid material should exist. The pattern's precision was stunning. Its angles repeated at ratios found in both natural crystal structures and engineered designs. It seemed to bridge 2 worlds, the randomness of geology and the intention of construction. Some sections of the pattern even resembled familiar circuit pathways, the kind found in computer chips or neural networks, except these spanned kilometers instead of microns. To scientists staring at the projection, it was both mesmerizing and terrifying. If this was real, then something within Jupiter's atmosphere wasn't just forming shapes, it was creating design. NASA's official statement came cautiously. They described the data as anomalous structured patterns detected in Juno's final transmission. But behind closed doors, no one doubted what they were looking at. The patterns were too ordered, too specific to dismiss. Some speculated it might be an unknown form of ice formation interacting with electromagnetic fields. Others whispered about something more extraordinary, a hybrid of nature and intelligence, matter arranged with purpose. Whatever it was, it seemed to blur the boundary between what is made and what simply is. As news of the discovery spread, humanity stood on the edge of understanding something that didn't fit into any known category. Was it a natural phenomenon behaving like technology, or technology disguised as nature? The image from Juno became an icon overnight, shared across the world, the ghostly blue silhouette of a circuit frozen in ice. For the first time, the question was no longer just about Eos 9 or its companions. The mystery had grown larger, deeper. It was as if Jupiter itself was holding onto something ancient and intelligent, waiting for us to finally notice. That single image changed everything. It wasn't proof of life, or a machine, or even an artifact. But it was undeniable evidence of pattern and purpose beyond chance. The world had just witnessed the first tangible sign of something that existed between creation and coincidence. Humanity had uncovered its first true enigma, a design that lived inside the heart of chaos, whispering that maybe the universe builds its own machines. Within a week of Juno's final transmission, the world was no longer calm. The image of the strange geometric structure had spread across every screen, every newsfeed, every classroom. People debated endlessly online. Some said it proved alien design, others claimed it was a glitch or a misunderstood weather pattern. But beneath the noise, something deeper began to take hold. Fear. The idea that something intelligent might be inside Jupiter, or watching from nearby, was too big for most to ignore. Governments were flooded with public questions they couldn't answer, and within days, the United Nations called for an emergency global session. For the first time in history, the planet gathered to discuss an object not from Earth. Inside the UN Assembly Hall, the atmosphere was electric and uneasy. Delegates from every major nation sat beneath a giant screen showing the latest official images of Eos 9 and the 5 smaller companions. The chair of the Committee on Outer Space Affairs began with a statement that tried to calm nerves, but it only fueled the tension. Behind the polite words was panic. Some countries demanded all information related to the Eos 9 discovery be classified immediately, calling it a potential cosmic security threat. Others argued that hiding the truth would only make things worse. Scientists begged for transparency, claiming that the only way to understand what was happening was to share the data freely. The arguments grew louder. Some wanted to prepare for contact. Others wanted to shut down all transmissions toward Jupiter, fearing a response we couldn't predict. While world leaders debated, independent astronomers around the globe decided they'd had enough. Many of them had been tracking Eos 9 from the beginning, using their own telescopes and radio equipment, and they refused to be silenced. A small group based in Chile, Spain, and Australia secretly coordinated a global live stream. They combined their data feeds into one synchronized broadcast and sent it out across the internet without permission. Millions of people tuned in as raw, unfiltered footage of Jupiter filled the screen, grainy, but real. It was the first time ordinary citizens saw what the governments were arguing over behind closed doors. The broadcast started simple: charts, light curves, and motion data. But halfway through, one astronomer's voice cracked with disbelief. He pointed out a small detail: Eos 9, which had been drifting steadily for weeks, had just shifted. At first, it seemed like a minor correction, but when overlaid with previous data, the pattern became clear. The object had changed course, not randomly, not from gravitational pull, but subtly and deliberately, like a pilot adjusting direction. The world held its breath. The astronomer repeated the numbers, double-checked the vectors, and confirmed what everyone feared to believe. Eos 9 wasn't just moving through space, it was reacting. As the live stream continued, millions watched in stunned silence. The object's new trajectory placed it slightly closer to Jupiter, but at an angle that suggested awareness. It had turned toward the planet's southern hemisphere, where the hexagonal vapor grid still shimmered faintly in the clouds. Even stranger, the energy pulses that had been quiet for days began to return, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat resuming after a long pause. The commentators on the stream didn't have to say anything, the implication was clear. Whatever EOS 9 was, it knew it was being watched. Within hours, the broadcast went viral. News networks replayed the footage endlessly. Hashtags about the turning and EOS 9 awakens dominated social media. Some saw it as proof of intelligence. Others called it manipulation by unknown forces or even a test from nature itself. Governments scrambled to regain control of the story, but it was too late. The stream had already been mirrored across countless servers, translated into dozens of languages, and spread beyond censorship. Humanity was witnessing something no one could contain, a cosmic mystery unfolding in real time. By the end of the day, every major news outlet in the world carried the same headline: it moved. Scientists on live television were forced to admit the truth, they didn't know how or why. Conspiracy theories erupted overnight, claiming the UN had known all along, that the object's shift meant invasion, contact, or warning. Panic rippled through cities, stock markets dipped, and yet amid all the confusion, one realization settled into the collective mind of humanity. The story of EOS 9 no longer belonged to scientists or governments. It belonged to everyone. For centuries, humans had looked up at the stars wondering if anyone was out there. Now, for the first time, the stars were looking back, and the world had no idea what to do about it. By December of 2025, the world had grown used to the presence of EOS 9. What had once been an unthinkable discovery had now become a constant reminder that humanity was being observed by something far beyond its understanding. As the months passed, the object continued its slow journey inward, moving from Jupiter's orbit toward Mars. Astronomers knew this moment would be critical. When an interstellar object reaches perihelion, the point in its orbit closest to the Sun, it usually heats up rapidly, shedding material and forming a bright tail like a comet. But EOS 9 was no ordinary object. Scientists waited anxiously to see what would happen when it entered the inner solar system's warmth. As it approached Mars' orbit, telescopes across the globe turned toward it. Space agencies scheduled coordinated observations, hoping to capture the event from multiple angles. Yet, as the data began streaming in, the results made no sense. EOS 9 wasn't heating up at all. Instruments measuring infrared emissions showed a perfectly stable temperature, unchanged even as sunlight intensified. This was impossible. Any natural object exposed to solar radiation should react, ice should evaporate, rock should warm, metals should glow faintly. But EOS 9 remained calm, almost indifferent to the star's energy. It was as if it were actively controlling its own temperature, defying the very laws of thermodynamics. That discovery ignited a storm of theories. Some scientists suggested it was covered in an unknown material, capable of reflecting nearly all sunlight. Others whispered about something more advanced, a system that could regulate energy, almost like a machine keeping itself alive. The conflict deepened as nations once again fought over access to the data. Governments feared what it might mean if EOS 9 truly had the ability to manipulate energy. If it could absorb and release radiation at will, it wasn't just a passive traveler. It was a functioning system, a mechanism of some kind. Then came the twist that no one could explain. Just as EOS 9 reached its closest point to the Sun near Mars' orbit, its brightness began to rise, but not in the usual way. Instead of reflecting sunlight, it started to emit its own. Its surface albedo, the measure of how much light an object reflects, skyrocketed far beyond natural limits. Within hours, EOS 9 appeared to be glowing, radiating a soft golden light into space. The glow wasn't chaotic like a flare, it pulsed gently, rhythmically, as if something inside was waking up. Observatories in Chile, Japan, and California all recorded the same thing: EOS 9 was generating light that wasn't from the sun. Telescopes began detecting subtle energy patterns within the glow, fluctuations that formed a repeating rhythm. When the data was converted into audio and analyzed by AI, the frequency variations formed an unmistakable sequence. It was the same mathematical pattern humanity had seen before, buried in the radio bursts months earlier: the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio. The pattern that defines balance in nature, from seashells to galaxies, was now shining from an object that had come from beyond the stars. This was no coincidence. EOS 9 was signaling in a language the universe itself seemed to understand. The world watched as the pulses grew clearer, repeating every few minutes, creating waves that expanded across space. The glow intensified briefly, enough that even amateur astronomers could see it as a faint golden shimmer near Mars. Some called it a heartbeat, others a code. Religious groups declared it divine, scientists called it the most advanced display of physics ever recorded. But regardless of belief, one thing became undeniable: EOS 9 wasn't just reacting to the sun. It was responding to it. In that moment, it felt as if the object was alive, not in the way humans understand life, but in a form of awareness. It had remained silent for months, enduring observation and interference, and now it was answering back. The golden pulses were steady, deliberate, even gentle, like the measured breath of something ancient finally stirring. The message seemed to carry no aggression, only presence, a statement that it was awake. The realization rippled through the scientific community. EOS 9 had crossed from a mystery of astronomy into something closer to communication. It had arrived in our system, survived Jupiter's storm, and now, under the warmth of our sun, it was awakening. Telescopes around the world continued to record its glowing rhythm, but no one could predict what it would do next. Humanity had been the watcher for so long, but now, for the first time, it felt as though the watcher was looking back. Just when the world had begun to focus entirely on EOS 9's glowing transformation near Mars, a new signal appeared on deep space radar. At first, it was faint, almost mistaken for background noise. But within hours, it grew stronger and clearer. A second fast-moving object had entered the solar system, this one coming from the opposite direction, heading straight toward the inner planets. Astronomers across the world confirmed it. The new object's trajectory was nearly a mirror image of EOS 9's path, as if drawn on the same invisible map from the opposite side of space. It was moving just as fast, following the same angle, cutting through the void like a twin reflection. The discovery sent scientists scrambling. Two interstellar objects, arriving so close together in time and moving in perfect opposition, was beyond coincidence. The new object was quickly named EOS 10. Unlike its predecessor, however, it didn't look stable. High-resolution images showed trails of debris following it, small, glowing fragments peeling away from its surface like burning embers. It was decaying, shedding material as it approached the orbit of Saturn, almost as if it were falling apart. Yet, even in its disintegration, its core held steady, moving with the same precise velocity as EOS 9. Something was keeping it alive, at least for now. The conflict deepened as scientists compared the two visitors. Every available telescope, probe, and satellite began collecting data. Their light signatures were nearly identical, down to the way they absorbed and reflected radiation. Their compositions matched: metallic hydrogen traces, rare isotopes, and elements never before recorded in interstellar matter. The only difference was stability. EOS 9 glowed with calm precision, perfectly balanced. EOS 10, on the other hand, flickered erratically, its outer shell breaking apart as if under internal stress. Some scientists theorized it was older, maybe damaged from traveling through deep space for longer. Others wondered if it was reacting to EOS 9 itself, drawn by some kind of invisible connection. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. Spectral analysis revealed something extraordinary: the isotopic fingerprints of both objects were identical. Every cosmic object carries a unique signature, a kind of elemental DNA that tells where it was formed. These two shared the exact same pattern, something that had never been observed before. It meant one thing: they came from the same origin. Whether they were pieces of a single ancient body or two creations from the same source, their link was undeniable. They weren't just visitors from beyond, they were related. The news spread fast, and the implications were overwhelming. If EOS 9 and EOS 10 were connected, then their arrival couldn't be random. Some kind of event, somewhere in the void between galaxies, had sent them both here. Were they messengers? Wreckage from a civilization long gone? Or parts of a single system now finding its way home? Every theory seemed equally unbelievable. Meanwhile, supercomputers began running simulations to predict their paths. As the calculations refined, the result left everyone speechless. The two objects were heading straight toward each other. Their projected meeting point was somewhere between the orbits of Mars and Earth, right in the inner solar system. At their current speeds, they would reach that point in less than 3 months. The world's observatories launched emergency coordination networks to prepare for the encounter. NASA reactivated dormant satellites, while the European Space Agency prepared to reposition its solar probes for close observation. Astronomers called it the rendezvous. To them, it felt like watching a cosmic play unfold, two ancient travelers converging across billions of kilometers as if drawn together by fate. But something else about EOS 10 caught everyone's attention. As it got closer, its fragments began to behave strangely. Instead of scattering randomly, they formed faint arcs of light that trailed behind, creating what looked like a bridge of dust glowing faintly between it and EOS 9's projected path. The particles aligned in wave-like patterns, pulsing ever so slightly, as though the two were already communicating. The world once again turned its eyes to the sky. Scientists, journalists, and ordinary people alike began counting down to the moment the two objects would meet. Were they part of a greater design? A message in motion? Or the beginning of something humanity couldn't yet comprehend? As EOS 9 continued to glow in gold and EOS 10 flickered like a dying ember, both streaked through the darkness toward each other. Two visitors from the same forgotten corner of the galaxy, now heading for a collision course between Mars and Earth, an encounter that would either reveal their secret or end in silence forever. The night of the meeting became one of the most watched events in human history. Every news network on Earth broadcast live coverage as telescopes locked onto the point between Mars and Earth where EOS 9 and its twin, EOS 10, were expected to collide. For weeks, scientists had warned that the two interstellar visitors were on a direct path toward each other, traveling at unimaginable speed. If they struck, the impact would unleash more energy than any explosion in recorded history, enough to light up the night sky and possibly alter nearby planetary orbits. Observatories prepared for disaster, space agencies issued safety alerts, and millions of people stayed awake, staring at live feeds of the sky, waiting for the collision that might change everything. But when the moment came, nothing went as expected. Instead of slamming into each other, the two objects began to slow down. Their relative velocity, which had been increasing for weeks, suddenly dropped. Spectrometers showed a strange resistance building between them, an invisible field pushing against their momentum. It was as if the laws of physics had quietly rewritten themselves in real time. The world held its breath as the distance between the two narrowed from thousands of kilometers to hundreds, then to just a few dozen. And then, to everyone's astonishment, they stopped. Two objects traveling at interstellar speed, carrying more energy than 1,000 warheads, had come to a perfect halt in the middle of space. At first, scientists thought the slowdown was caused by magnetic interaction or gravitational resonance, but the data didn't match. The forces involved were too balanced, too precise. The two objects hung motionless for several minutes, facing each other like reflections frozen in time. Then, slowly, they began to move again, but not toward collision. Instead, they started to rotate. Side by side, they spun in unison, aligning their axes perfectly. It was a motion too deliberate to be coincidence. Their orbits stabilized around a shared center point, forming a binary pair, each circling the other in perfect harmony. The entire event unfolded with eerie smoothness, as if it had been rehearsed. The twist sent shockwaves through the scientific community. No known natural objects behaved like this. Binary asteroids exist, yes, but they form over millions of years, not in the span of minutes, and certainly not at these speeds. This wasn't a random encounter. It was a performance, a sequence of actions that seemed guided. As the two visitors continued to orbit each other, faint lines of light began to shimmer between them. At first, the glow was too weak to detect clearly, but as the rotation stabilized, those lines grew brighter. Instruments on Earth and in orbit detected powerful electromagnetic emissions linking the two. When the readings came in, scientists were stunned. The lines weren't just light, they were energy bridges, long plasma filaments connecting Eos 9 and Eos 10 across the empty vacuum. Plasma can exist in space, but only under extreme conditions, and it almost never forms stable structures on its own. Yet here were two interstellar objects maintaining glowing, thread-like connections between them, steady and rhythmic. The bridges pulsed in time with the same golden ratio pattern that had been observed in Eos 9's earlier signals. It was as though the two were exchanging energy, or perhaps information. Observatories around the world struggled to keep up with the event. The plasma filaments shifted colors between gold and violet, sometimes expanding into complex geometric webs before collapsing back into simple arcs. It looked like communication, two enormous beings talking in a language made of light. AI analysis of the waveform suggested that the pulses weren't random. They contained repeating frequencies with fractal-like properties, patterns that seemed to evolve as the connection continued. The binary pair was alive with energy, vibrating in ways that no natural formation ever could. By the time the plasma stabilized, something had become unmistakably clear. These objects weren't just reacting to each other, they were working together, operating as parts of a single system. It was as if one had been waiting for the other, and now that they were reunited, a dormant process had begun. The lights between them grew brighter, forming a faint halo visible even to amateur telescopes on Earth. For the first time since entering the solar system, Eos 9 and Eos 10 were no longer silent travelers. They were active, synchronized, and very much alive. Scientists and citizens alike watched in stunned awe. The binary pair continued their silent orbit, glowing softly as energy flowed between them, like two hearts sharing the same pulse. Humanity had expected a collision, a violent end. Instead, it had witnessed a union, a connection so precise and deliberate that it defied every explanation. Whatever these visitors were, they weren't lifeless debris or random cosmic wanderers. They had awoken, and now, they were doing something. When the twin objects locked into orbit and the plasma bridges between them stabilized, the world thought the show was over. People assumed the glowing filaments were simply some kind of natural energy exchange, a breathtaking but silent event. But they were wrong. Within days, radio telescopes around the planet began detecting strange modulations buried deep in the plasma's electromagnetic output. It wasn't just energy, it was communication. The signal carried patterns, fluctuations, and timing that didn't belong to random plasma behavior. It pulsed, paused, and repeated in a deliberate rhythm, the kind that spoke of intention rather than accident. The first to notice were astronomers at the Parkes Observatory in Australia. Late one night, while scanning the binary pair's radio emissions, they picked up faint oscillations repeating at precise intervals. The timing was too consistent, down to microseconds. When they shared the data with other observatories, the confirmation was immediate, the same signal was being detected everywhere. Every radio telescope on Earth was hearing the same pulse from the same source, as if the two visitors were transmitting together. The world held its breath as analysts began breaking down the structure of the message. At first, it seemed simple. The pulse frequencies lined up with known mathematical constants, ratios like pi, Euler's number, and the speed of light in vacuum. These are the universal fingerprints of logic, numbers that would be recognized by any intelligent being capable of understanding physics. It was as if the message began by saying, "We understand your language, mathematics." But just as researchers thought they were beginning to interpret it, the signal changed. The clean constants vanished, replaced by a new sequence of pulses, each one shorter and sharper than before. When mapped, they formed prime numbers, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, and so on. Prime numbers are nature's simplest proof of intelligence. They have no natural rhythm in space, they are pure, intentional order. The fact that the message used them was unmistakable, it was communication in its most universal form. But then, something strange happened. Every sequence of primes ended with the same final number, 42. Over and over again, no matter how long the chain, it always concluded with that number before starting again. At first, people laughed at the coincidence, calling it a nod to pop culture and science fiction. But scientists quickly realized it was too specific to be random. Whoever, or whatever, was sending this message understood not only math but also meaning. The discovery sent the world into frenzy. Media outlets called it the first verified alien signal, while governments scrambled to take control of the data. But this time, it was too late to contain. The recordings had already been mirrored and uploaded by countless independent researchers across the world. Anyone with an internet connection could download the raw signal and try to decode it themselves. What followed was the largest open-source science collaboration in history, a global effort combining astrophysics, linguistics, and artificial intelligence. Teams from NASA, the European Space Agency, and independent labs began analyzing the waveform. AI models trained on thousands of languages, mathematical codes, and symbolic systems worked around the clock to identify hidden layers. Some of the modulations behaved like syntax, others like repetition markers or punctuation. It was as if the message wasn't just numbers, it had structure, almost like grammar. As the patterns unfolded, new harmonics appeared, faint but consistent across every recording. The deeper scientists dug, the more it seemed that the binary pair wasn't just broadcasting, it was teaching, layering meaning inside mathematics itself. For weeks, data centers around the world churned through the information, looking for a breakthrough. Then, one quiet morning, the translation algorithm at the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy produced something remarkable. When all variables were aligned, when all wave harmonics were mapped and mirrored through Fibonacci ratios, the message stabilized. It wasn't a sound or a symbol this time. It was language. A single phrase repeated over and over, clear enough to read without doubt. We are not the first. The message spread across the world within hours. Scientists confirmed it independently, verifying the data again and again. The meaning was simple, but the implications were enormous. It wasn't a threat, nor a greeting, it was a statement, one that hinted at something ancient and shared. Humanity wasn't the first to discover the universe, to build, to dream, or to fall silent between the stars. The realization sent chills across the planet. Somewhere, sometime, others had come before. And EOS 9 and its twin were here to remind us of that forgotten truth. The message, "We are not the first," spread like wildfire. It echoed in every scientific forum, news outlet, and classroom across the world. The statement wasn't just mysterious, it was an invitation, a challenge to look backward instead of forward. If we weren't the first, then who was? That question pushed scientists to turn their attention from the skies to the Earth itself. Teams of geologists, paleoclimatologists, and astrophysicists began to dig through our planet's ancient records, searching for any sign that something like EOS 9 might have visited before. If similar events had occurred in the past, they would have left traces, radiation signatures, unusual isotopes, or patterns in the layers of rock and ice that recorded Earth's long history. The search started quietly but soon became a global effort. Satellite archives were re-examined, deep-sea sediment cores were reopened, and samples from polar expeditions were reanalyzed using new instruments capable of detecting atomic fingerprints that had never been measurable before. For months, there was nothing unusual, just the expected story of Earth's slow, natural evolution. But then, in a climate lab in Greenland, a researcher noticed something odd. Hidden deep within an ice core extracted from layers dating back nearly 12,000 years was a narrow band of material that didn't match anything known on Earth. The isotopes it contained were incredibly rare, with energy ratios identical to those found in the plasma surrounding Eos 9. When word reached the broader scientific community, the reaction was disbelief. Ice cores are like time machines, they trap ancient air, dust, and even cosmic particles that fall to Earth. If the composition matched Eos 9, it meant that something with the same origin had been here before. Other research teams immediately began checking their own archives, and the pattern that emerged was astonishing. Every 12,000 years, give or take a few centuries, the planet showed traces of anomalous isotopic activity. Ancient volcanic rocks in South America, desert glass in Africa, and ocean sediments in the Pacific all carried the same chemical markers, subtle but consistent. The conflict among scientists grew intense. Some insisted it had to be coincidence or a quirk of natural radiation cycles. Others argued that there was no known geological or astronomical explanation for such regular intervals. If these traces truly came from space, they suggested a repeating phenomenon, something that visited our solar system on a fixed timeline. The evidence lined up eerily well with Eos 9's arrival. It wasn't random. It was routine. Then came the twist that silenced the debate. In a lab in Antarctica, a sample from the oldest section of ice ever drilled, dating back more than 700,000 years, revealed the same fingerprint again. The ratios of rare isotopes matched Eos 9's signature almost perfectly. But there was more. Embedded within the ice were microscopic grains, almost crystalline in structure, unlike anything terrestrial. Under magnification, they appeared organized, layered, and symmetrical, natural yet precise. They looked like seeds, tiny frozen artifacts made of elements impossible to form under Earth's temperature and pressure. When exposed to controlled heat, they didn't melt like ice or metal, they shimmered, emitting faint bursts of electromagnetic energy before dissolving completely. It was as if something long ago had sprinkled fragments of itself into our atmosphere, small enough to drift and settle across the planet, only to vanish as quietly as it had come. The discovery led to a bold new theory: maybe these visitors weren't coming here for the first time. Maybe they had been visiting Earth for thousands, even hundreds of thousands, of years, each time leaving behind traces that would one day awaken curiosity in whoever came next. And perhaps, in some distant past, those traces had done more than just linger. Maybe they had seeded something, molecules, patterns, or even inspiration that shaped the life we now take for granted. Scientists debated whether Eos 9 and Eos 10 were returning probes, ancient machines repeating a cycle set in motion long before humanity existed. Others believed they might be caretakers, guardians of some universal experiment, coming back every 12,000 years to observe what had become of their work. Whatever the truth, one conclusion was impossible to deny: the evidence proved this was not first contact. Earth had been part of this story all along. As the world absorbed the revelation, a strange calm replaced the earlier fear. Humanity wasn't the center of the universe, it was part of a repeating pattern, a long-running dialogue between creation and discovery. Eos 9's arrival wasn't an accident, it was a return, right on schedule. Somewhere, across the lightless void between stars, the same cycle might be playing out again and again, on worlds we'll never see. And this time, we were awake to witness it. Months after the world had begun to accept that Eos 9's arrival was part of a much older pattern, a new discovery reignited the mystery. Technicians at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory had been quietly working on a nearly impossible task: recovering the corrupted data from Juno's final transmission. Most of the files were too damaged to read, filled with static and radiation noise, but one small segment suddenly caught the analyst's attention. Hidden deep within the telemetry logs was a set of magnetic readings that hadn't come from Jupiter at all. They originated from its icy moon, Europa. The signal showed something strange, an anomaly buried beneath Europa's thick crust of ice, pulsating faintly in rhythm. At first, no one paid much attention. Magnetic irregularities on Europa weren't uncommon, the moon's subsurface ocean often distorted readings. But this was different. The pattern wasn't random. It repeated in exact intervals that matched the same 91-minute energy bursts first detected from Eos, 9 months earlier. It was as if Europa itself was responding to the visitors orbiting far away. When the recovered data was compared against recent plasma readings, the correlation was perfect. Something beneath Europa's surface was pulsing in sync with Eos, 9. That kind of coordination, across millions of kilometers, couldn't be coincidence. The conflict began as soon as this information reached international space agencies. The United States wanted to keep the data secret, fearing global panic. But the European Space Agency, already leading several deep space research missions, argued that it was their responsibility to investigate. Private companies began to leak hints of the discovery online, forcing officials to acknowledge the anomaly's existence. Soon, high-resolution scans from the Hubble Space Telescope and radar mapping from previous missions were re-examined, revealing faint geometric distortions under Europa's ice shell. They weren't natural cracks or ridges, they formed perfect arcs and straight lines, stretching for kilometers. When the pattern was digitally reconstructed, it resembled a network of interconnected chambers, a structure far too symmetrical to be made by chance. The twist sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Beneath Europa's frozen surface, deep within its hidden ocean, there was something enormous. Not a cave, not a fissure, but a formation built with precision, kilometers wide, made up of repeating geometric designs that mirrored the pattern seen in Eos 9's plasma bridges. It looked like architecture. The structure appeared ancient, buried under layers of ice that had sealed over it for millions of years. If it was real, it meant the visitors hadn't just passed by this part of the solar system, they had left something behind. As the implications sank in, the debate grew fierce. Was this proof of alien construction, or just a strange natural feature that mimicked design? No one could say for sure without seeing it up close. After weeks of negotiation, the European Space Agency made a decision that would mark a turning point in human history. They authorized a secret mission, codenamed Project Mirror. The name came from the idea that Europa might be reflecting something, the past, or a piece of itself still alive beneath the ice. The mission's goal was simple: send a specialized probe to drill into Europa's surface and scan the magnetic anomaly directly. The plan was classified, shared only among a small group of scientists and engineers. A modified lander equipped with cryogenic drills and magnetic sensors was prepared in record time. The design incorporated shielding strong enough to withstand radiation from Jupiter's magnetic field and tools capable of piercing 10 kilometers of frozen crust. The probe would be small, remote, and fully autonomous. Because no one could risk sending humans that far into Jupiter's deadly orbit. Every component was tested, retested, and encrypted to prevent leaks. When news of the mission finally surfaced, the world was stunned. For the first time, humanity was preparing not just to observe but to reach out, to physically touch what might be an artifact of another intelligence. The thought of drilling into the icy shell of Europa, into a structure that had been pulsing quietly in harmony with an object from beyond the stars, was almost too much to believe. Still, the launch date was set, and for a brief moment, the world stood united in awe. As Project Mirror's launch window approached, scientists and engineers worked through sleepless nights, aware that they might be the first to make contact with a legacy older than humanity itself. The probe would dive through Europa's silence, carrying with it the hopes, fears, and questions of an entire planet. If the anomaly beneath the ice truly connected to Eos 9's rhythm, then what lay waiting down there wasn't just a mystery, it was an answer. And for the first time, humans were ready to dig into the truth buried in their own cosmic backyard. The day Project Mirror launched, the world watched in silence. The probe's engines flared bright against the darkness, beginning its long journey toward Europa and the secret that waited beneath its ice. It was a moment of hope, a reminder that humanity was still reaching outward, still brave enough to face the unknown. But just as the mission began its journey, the sky gave us something new to fear. On the same day, deep space monitors picked up strange activity near Eos 10, the decaying twin of Eos 9. For months, scientists had watched it spin beside its companion, flickering like a dying ember. Now, it was breaking apart. At first, the disintegration looked like a natural process. Images showed Eos 10's surface cracking, glowing with heat, and releasing fragments that scattered into the void. Many assumed it was finally collapsing under the strain of its orbit with Eos 9. But as the fragments began spreading across the solar system, it became clear this was no ordinary breakup. The pieces weren't random. They moved in coordinated paths, fanning out in a perfect spiral formation, each fragment maintaining a steady distance from the others. The pattern was too precise, too intentional to be a simple explosion. Something was controlling it, or at least guiding it. Then came the real danger. As Eos 10 continued to crumble, some of its fragments were caught by the sun's gravity and redirected toward the inner solar system. Within hours, orbital simulations showed a handful of them were headed toward Earth's vicinity. Panic rippled through mission control centers across the globe. Were we about to be hit by alien debris? Would they burn up harmlessly, or would they survive entry? Governments issued no public statements, but leaks began appearing online. Satellite tracking images showing faint trails of glowing dust moving closer to our planet. The conflict grew as new data emerged. The fragments weren't behaving like rocks or ice. They were small, many only meters across, but they emitted faint rhythmic light pulses, identical to the golden ratio sequence seen earlier in Eos 9's signals. Each fragment flashed in perfect timing, as though all were synced to the same invisible clock. It wasn't random radiation or reflection from the sun, it was communication. Something within those pieces was alive with energy, sending patterns that matched the same mathematical signature humanity had already learned to recognize. As the fragments drew nearer, satellites across different nations began intercepting their emissions. Instruments recorded faint vibrations in electromagnetic fields every time a pulse passed by. The rhythm was slow, almost like breathing. Several fragments passed near the moon, scattering clouds of dust that drifted through space in shimmering arcs. When one of these clouds brushed against Earth's outer atmosphere, weather satellites captured something extraordinary, microscopic particles suspended in orbit, glinting like tiny crystals. Scientists immediately began analyzing the data from those satellites, and what they found changed everything. The particles weren't ordinary space dust. Under spectral analysis, they revealed a repeating hexagonal pattern, an atomic arrangement that didn't exist in any known natural material. Each grain was structured like a microscopic honeycomb, perfectly symmetrical, as though engineered. The discovery sent shockwaves through every lab studying the Eos events. These fragments weren't just leftovers from a dying object, they were something else entirely. When 3D models of the dust were constructed, the resemblance was unmistakable. The hexagonal geometry matched the same shapes seen in the vapor plumes that Eos 9's companions had released months earlier near Jupiter. The same symbol repeated again and again, across cosmic distances and different events. The universe was speaking in patterns, and humanity was just beginning to recognize the language. Some scientists suggested the fragments were a form of data storage, microscopic carriers holding information. Others believed they were seeds, each one a vessel capable of rebuilding or transmitting something greater when it reached the right environment. Governments tried to contain the discovery, calling the material non-hazardous space debris, but no one believed that explanation. The pulses continued, faint but constant, even as the fragments drifted past Earth's orbit. Every few hours, sensors detected coordinated flashes, almost like a slow, deliberate heartbeat stretching across the night sky. The world watched, waiting for them to stop, but they never did. By the time Project Mirror reached the halfway point to Europa, the meaning of those fragments had begun to shift. What scientists once called debris now looked more like design. Every shattered piece of EOS-10 was following a plan, moving in harmony, sending signals to one another and perhaps to EOS-9 itself. Humanity realized with growing unease that the disintegration might not have been an accident. It might have been an act of release, a way of spreading something across the solar system. And as the fragments continued their silent journey through the darkness, one truth became harder to ignore. These weren't remnants of destruction. They were messages, tiny, shining codes drifting between worlds, waiting for someone to understand what they meant. By early 2026, the world had reached a breaking point. The mystery of EOS-9 and its shattered twin had become more than science, it had become a matter of belief. Every nation, every community, every person seemed to have chosen a side. Some saw the fragments and signals as a miracle, proof that humanity wasn't alone and that we were part of something greater. Others saw them as a threat, a slow-moving invasion hidden behind beauty and mystery. Protests erupted in cities worldwide. In one part of the world, people gathered with telescopes and candles, praying toward the night sky. In another, demonstrators demanded governments destroy every last fragment before it reached Earth. The discovery that once united humanity in wonder was now tearing it apart. The conflict deepened as fear took control. Military leaders across several nations warned that waiting could be catastrophic. They argued that EOS-9's fragments could contain technology or biological material that might infect Earth. Satellite imagery showing fragments orbiting closer each week only fueled that fear. In secret, defense organizations began coordinating a response. Space-based missile platforms were put on alert, and experimental interceptors were prepared to target any object that crossed the upper atmosphere. Officially, no one admitted it, but the world was on the edge of launching humanity's first war in space. At the same time, scientists pleaded for restraint. They argued that the fragments' behavior was too deliberate to be hostile. If these objects had the ability to travel between stars, they could have easily destroyed us already. The rhythmic pulses, the geometric dust, the harmonic energy patterns, all of it suggested communication, not conquest. But logic had little power against fear. The news ran headlines about the alien threat, and social media boiled with panic. The line between defense and paranoia began to blur. Then came the decision. In a joint operation never officially announced, several military satellites launched interceptor drones toward a group of EOS-10 fragments drifting near Earth's orbit. The world didn't know it was happening, until it was over. Within minutes of launch, the interceptors reached their targets and fired, releasing bursts of energy meant to vaporize the debris. But instead of exploding, the fragments simply vanished. Radar and infrared systems showed nothing. No explosion, no debris, not even heat signatures. It was as though they had slipped out of existence. The interceptors continued on their paths into empty space, their sensors blind. At first, officials tried to explain it as equipment failure, but the truth spread quickly among scientists. The fragments hadn't disappeared, they had been absorbed. Instruments all over the world began detecting sudden distortions in electromagnetic fields, as if something invisible had entered the Earth's own magnetic bubble. When researchers analyzed the data, they realized the impossible. The fragments had merged with Earth's magnetosphere, embedding themselves in the planet's invisible shield. It was as if they had dissolved into the field lines that protect us from solar radiation, becoming part of the magnetic energy that wraps around the planet. This revelation changed everything. The very space that separates Earth from the void, the silent layer that guides compass needles and paints auroras in the sky, had been invaded. Satellites detected subtle rhythmic variations in magnetic strength, faint echoes of the same golden ratio pulses that once came from EOS-9. The rhythm was slow and constant, as if the fragments were settling in, adapting, integrating. The reaction on Earth was immediate and divided. Some claimed this was proof of invasion, that the planet's defenses had been breached. Others saw it as something more profound, a kind of joining between humanity and the cosmos. Scientists explained that the fragments weren't interfering with electronics or causing damage, they seemed content just to exist there, woven into the magnetic fabric of the planet. Still, the fear didn't fade. Governments declared new emergency protocols. Astronomers were ordered to monitor every change in the magnetosphere. Yet, no one could remove what was now part of the Earth itself. As the weeks passed, people began to notice strange things. Compass readings drifted slightly off true north. The auroras glowed more intensely, spreading farther toward the equator than ever before. The skies shimmered with strange patterns at night, beautiful, haunting displays that seemed to mirror the same hexagonal lattices once seen above Jupiter. Humanity realized, too late, that the visitors hadn't needed to land to reach us. They had already entered through the one doorway we could never close, the magnetic heartbeat of our own world. What had once been distant and unreachable was now wrapped around us, silent and unseen. The visitors had not come to conquer or destroy. They had become part of the Earth's invisible skin, watching, listening, and perhaps waiting for what would come next. It started quietly, almost unnoticed. Astronomers studying Earth's magnetosphere began to pick up faint distortions in satellite telemetry, tiny glitches in data transmissions that didn't belong. At first, they looked like random noise, the kind of static caused by space radiation or solar flares. But then the pattern started to repeat. The same clusters of binary digits, ones and zeros, kept appearing across different satellites, even those in separate orbits. It wasn't random interference. The anomalies were too structured, too clean. Someone, or something, was whispering through the noise. Engineers at first thought it was a system malfunction, maybe a software issue caused by the magnetic fragments that had merged with Earth's field. But as more satellites reported the same behavior, a strange truth began to emerge. The binary signals were adapting. Every time scientists tried to block or isolate the frequency, the pattern shifted, moving to a new range of communication. It was like trying to catch a voice in a storm that refused to be silenced. The data packets carried no known encryption, no sign of human origin, yet they followed a rhythm, steady, deliberate, almost conversational. The conflict spread between agencies and research teams. Some wanted to shut down satellite networks until they understood what was happening. Others insisted this might be the moment humanity had been waiting for, direct communication from whatever intelligence had sent EOS 9. The debate grew tense, but in secret, a small international team of scientists began analyzing the binary stream using advanced AI filters. Their goal was simple: to find meaning hidden within the pattern. As the algorithms worked, something unexpected happened. When the data was cleaned and slowed down, it began forming a waveform, a visual pattern that looked eerily like sound frequencies. When converted to audio, the result sent chills through the control room. It wasn't static anymore. It was a voice. The sound was faint, layered, distorted, but undeniably human-like. Deep and distant, it carried tone and inflection, as if speaking through layers of time and space. The researchers froze as the AI system attempted to reconstruct the message, separating the noise from the speech. And then, through the speakers, words began to take shape. "We once lived where you live now." The sentence echoed through the room, robotic yet emotional, synthetic yet filled with something that felt ancient. For a long moment, no one spoke. The voice repeated once more, then fell silent, replaced by the low hum of background interference. Everyone there understood what they had just heard might be the first direct statement from an extraterrestrial intelligence. The message wasn't aggressive or cryptic, it was personal. It suggested history, loss, and perhaps a warning. Whoever they were, they claimed to have lived here before us. The discovery sent shockwaves around the world. Governments tried to suppress the recording, but copies had already leaked. Within hours, the voice was being shared everywhere, from science forums to social media feeds. People debated endlessly what it meant. Was it literal, or symbolic? Did it refer to Earth, or to the solar system itself? Some believed the message meant these beings had once inhabited our planet, long before humanity. Others thought they had come from a civilization in the same orbit, perhaps a lost world or a moon that no longer existed. But the mystery didn't end there. When researchers examined the data stream after the voice faded, they noticed something else. Embedded at the end of the binary pattern was a long string of coordinates. When mapped, the numbers didn't point to any location on Earth. They led outward, to the icy moon Europa. The coordinates matched perfectly with the same region beneath the ice where Juno had detected the magnetic anomaly months earlier, the very place Project Mirror was heading. It was as if the message was guiding humanity toward something buried there, waiting to be found. As the news spread, a strange silence settled across the scientific world. The coincidence was too perfect to ignore. The timing, the data, the connection, all of it pointed to one truth: whatever intelligence spoke through Earth's magnetic field knew about Europa. It knew about the anomaly under the ice. And it wanted us to look there. For days, the signal remained quiet. The binary whispers stopped, and satellites returned to normal operation. But in the background radiation, faint and nearly lost, some instruments still picked up echoes, a soft vibration that pulsed every few hours, as if the voice hadn't fully disappeared. It was waiting, patient and still, leaving humanity with one haunting thought. Maybe the message wasn't a story from the past at all. Maybe it was a reminder that the ones who came before never truly left. Project Mirror reached Europa after months of silent travel through the cold darkness of space. The small probe, no larger than a car, had carried with it the hopes and fears of an entire species. As it entered Jupiter's orbit, its heat shield glowed against the giant planet's radiation storms. Then, it swung toward Europa, the frozen moon that had haunted human imagination for decades. From a distance, the moon looked like a smooth pearl floating in shadow, its surface lined with endless cracks and ridges. But deep beneath that ice lay a hidden ocean, an entire world waiting to be touched for the first time. The descent was slow and careful. Every system on Project Mirror came online in sequence as it glided toward the surface. When it landed, its metal frame sank slightly into the icy crust, sending vibrations through the frozen ground. Then, the drilling sequence began. A concentrated heat beam and cryogenic drill started boring into the surface, melting its way downward meter by meter. The probe's sensors measured temperature, pressure, and chemical composition as it went deeper, broadcasting every detail back to Earth through encrypted channels. For hours, the signal remained steady, until the radar imaging began showing something strange. Under the surface, beyond the first few kilometers of ice, the radar showed shapes that shouldn't exist in nature. Straight lines. Perfect arcs. Reflective surfaces arranged in a grid-like pattern. At first, engineers thought the readings were artifacts, errors caused by signal interference. But as the data came through clearer, the truth became undeniable. Something metallic was buried beneath Europa's icy shell, submerged in the liquid ocean below. The shapes were too organized to be random, massive geometric structures stretching across kilometers. They weren't formed by water currents or volcanic activity. They looked designed. The conflict grew in the control room as scientists argued over what they were seeing. Some believed it was a natural crystal formation, a trick of reflection. Others whispered the impossible, that it was artificial, a construct left behind by someone, or something. The deeper the probe went, the more detailed the radar images became. The metallic formations formed a vast circular pattern, with a hollow center and branching corridors radiating outward. It looked like a vault, an enormous chamber buried beneath ice and sealed for ages. Then came the twist that changed everything. As the probe drilled through the last few meters and dropped into the liquid layer beneath, its sonar sensors detected soft sediments resting at the base of the structure. The analysis showed traces of carbon, silicates, and complex organic molecules, materials usually associated with life. The vault wasn't just metal, it was preserving something inside. Instruments recorded faint radiation signatures consistent with long-frozen biological matter, and then the probe's camera came online, sending its first images from Europa's ocean. The video feed flickered, full of interference, but the shapes it revealed were unmistakable. Fossilized organisms clung to the inner walls of the metallic structure, their forms unlike anything known on Earth. Some were long and spiral-shaped, others built in perfect hexagons, as if nature itself had taken lessons in geometry. The organisms were complex, multicellular, and fossilized in positions that suggested they once moved freely in liquid water. When computer modeling reconstructed their DNA-like structures from chemical data, the results were shocking. They were older than Earth itself. The isotopic dating placed their origin billions of years before our planet had even formed. The probe's instruments continued to transmit as long as they could, sending image after image of the alien fossils and the smooth, precise walls of the vault that held them. It was clear that this structure wasn't just a natural cavern. It was a preservation site, a cosmic archive built to protect the last remains of a civilization or a species that had lived, evolved, and perished long before humanity existed. Europa, it seemed, was not just a moon. It was a tomb, and perhaps also a seed vault, holding the story of life that began elsewhere. As Earth's scientists watched in silence, the implications settled like gravity. The organisms found beneath Europa weren't random. They shared faint molecular markers with the isotopic dust released from Eos 9 and its twin, markers so precise that they couldn't be coincidence. It was as if the fragments that drifted through the solar system, the objects that pulsed with strange energy, and the structures buried beneath the ice were all parts of the same lineage. The visitors weren't strangers. They were descendants, returning to the place where it all began. The transmission ended suddenly as the probe's systems overloaded from radiation exposure. But its final frame showed one last image, the reflection of its own light shining against the metallic vault, revealing engraved symbols in the ice. Simple, repeating patterns, the same ones seen in the plasma bridges between Eos 9 and Eos 10. It was the universe's handwriting, repeating its message across time and distance. Humanity had found proof of ancient life beneath Europa's ocean, and with it, the truth that the visitors from beyond the stars weren't coming to meet us for the first time. They were coming home. The twin objects, Eos 9 and Eos 10, began to drift away from the solar system as quietly as they had arrived. Their glowing plasma bridges dimmed, their rhythmic pulses slowed, and soon the lights that once dazzled telescopes faded into the endless black. They left behind no debris, no signal, no trace of propulsion, only silence. Astronomers around the world watched as their paths curved gently toward the edge of the heliosphere, the invisible boundary where the sun's influence gives way to interstellar space. It was as if they had finished what they came to do and were now returning home, leaving humanity to wonder what their visit had truly meant. The scientific community was thrown into chaos. Decades of understanding, built on the assumption that Earth was the only cradle of life within reach, suddenly felt fragile and incomplete. Conferences turned into debates that bordered on shouting matches. Were the visitors messengers or remnants of something long gone? Some scientists argued that they were ancient machines, drifting archives of a lost civilization. Others believed they were alive in ways we couldn't yet define, beings of energy and matter intertwined, communicating through harmonics and geometry instead of language. The evidence was overwhelming but incomplete, leaving the world suspended between awe and existential dread. The public, too, struggled to comprehend the truth. Some people saw beauty in what had happened, calling it proof that life was far more resilient than anyone had imagined. Others were haunted by the message that had echoed through satellites weeks earlier, "We once lived where you live now." If that was true, then humanity was standing in the footsteps of a species that had vanished. And if they could disappear, so could we. For the first time, humanity faced the possibility that existence itself was part of a repeating cycle: creation, discovery, silence, and return. Then, just as the last trace of the visitors seemed to vanish, something happened that no one could explain. The Earth's ionosphere, the thin, electrified layer that wraps around the planet, began to hum. Instruments from every continent recorded a low, harmonious vibration rising through the magnetic field. It lasted for only a few minutes, but the pattern was unmistakable. It was the same golden ratio tone that had first signaled EOS 9's arrival near Jupiter. The frequency built, resonated, and then gently faded, leaving only the faint whisper of static in its wake. It was like a final goodbye, or perhaps a reminder. The phenomenon united people in a way nothing else could. For a brief moment, borders, politics, and rivalries felt meaningless. Every nation had witnessed the same event, heard the same tone, and realized the same truth: humanity was not alone, and never had been. The scientific community called for cooperation instead of competition, and from that call, a new global initiative was born. It was named the Atlas Accord. Under it, countries pledged to share research, resources, and data about the EOS events. The goal wasn't just to understand what had happened, but to prepare for the next time. Because if the message carved into the fabric of space was true, then the visitors' return wasn't an accident. It was part of a cycle, and that meant it would happen again. For years to come, the Atlas Accord became the heart of humanity's new mission. New observatories were built not just to look outward, but to listen. Satellites began scanning the skies for harmonic patterns, for voices hidden in the cosmic static. Space agencies merged programs, creating teams dedicated to the search for ancient technology, planetary archaeology, and interstellar communication. For the first time, humanity wasn't just exploring the universe for curiosity, it was preparing for conversation. And as the years passed, people began to notice subtle changes. The auroras that had once flickered wildly after the fragments entered Earth's magnetosphere now glowed with a calm rhythm, pulsing faintly in the same golden intervals. It was as if a quiet presence still lingered within the planet's magnetic field, watching, listening, waiting. Children growing up during that era looked to the night sky not with fear, but with wonder. They had grown up in a world that had heard the voice of something far greater than itself, and that knowledge reshaped what it meant to be human. In the end, the visitors left no monuments, no technology, no weapons, only questions and the awareness that we were part of something vast and ancient. The narrator's voice might have said it best: maybe the galaxy